This is the DRF Sports Form podcast. Here's your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Sports Form podcast. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale, back with you in the Brooklyn bunker to look ahead to a weekend of NFL action. Also to talk just a little bit about this first week of bowl games. We were originally talking about maybe doing our big bowl show today, but we realized, looking at the calendar, that the games that we want to cover for that show aren't happening in the next week. We're going to save that, give ourselves a little bit more time to dive deeper, and we will be going there in terms of our College Bowl special, perhaps with some sort of competition element for next week's show. Though we will touch just briefly on some of the bowl games happening in the next week by the end. I am joined today by the usual crew, and we'll start off with the managing editor of the DRF Sports Form and a fine handicapper in his own right, Scott Gramling. Scott, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Pete. Great to be with you as always.
Excellent. And joining us once again, you know him as Mr. Friday Night Lights. You also know him as the People's Champion. He's currently sweating some gimmick in horse racing somewhere, perhaps the town we affectionately call Lex Vegas, based on some of the company he's been keeping. Jonathon Kinchen. JK, what's up?
You also know him as the guy that had the Patriots teased on Sunday.
I'm going to get to that. Don't start off on that tangent. We'll be talking about the Patriots. I was going to bring up the miracle, the so-called miracle in Miami, and we'll give you a chance to vent your spleen. And Scott, you as a Patriots fan, your chance to do some spleen venting as well. So
brutal.
We'll be getting there in a little bit, but I want to start off. We have for the second week in only a handful of weeks, a very important Thursday night contest. I want to get to that right away. Some folks, this game may have happened by the time you listen. Sorry, but there was no way we were going to be able to do the show without talking about LA at KC. So, Scott, I'm going to start with you and your thoughts. Is this one to watch or one to bet?
I think it is one to bet. I love the Chiefs in this game. I really do. I know that the Chargers are coming into this game hot, but the Chiefs, they've won 6 of their past 7 as well. So you're looking at 2 hot teams. I have a great betting system here. NFL favorites that are coming off 3 wins over the past 4 games are 37-1 against the spread. That's 33-0 -7 and 1.
I'm glad you clarified. I was going to ask.
37-1, right? So that's since the start of the 2009 season, when going up against an opponent that's won at least 8 of its previous 10 games. So that really counts for both teams that are hot. And the average margin in that has been a double-digit victory for those favorites, and they've only been favored by an average of about 4 points per game in those games. And when that favorite is a home team, it's 25-5-1 against the spread. I just think when you look at what Kansas City has done in recent years against competition within the division, the Chiefs are 20-1 straight up against AFC West opponents since the midway part of the 2015 season, and they're 15-6 against the spread over that same time frame. So to me, I really think the Chiefs are the pick here. I feel strongly about that. I know that people like to knock the Chiefs' defense, but this is the kind of offense against which Kansas City has risen to the occasion in recent seasons. The Chargers averaging 268.8 passing yards per game. That's 9th in the NFL. But the Chiefs, since the start of 2016, 9-1 straight up and 8-0-2 against the spread when facing an opponent that's throwing for an average of at least 260 yards per game. I think there's a lot of reasons to like Kansas City here. I never like giving the hook in a spread that's 3.5, but I do like the Chiefs an awful lot on Thursday night.
JK, your thoughts on this one? Will the Chiefs continue the recent dominance over the Chargers?
2 weeks ago on this show, Scott gave you a bunch of reasons why the Chargers were going to lose his best bet in the Steelers. And Scott lost. However, Scott was right. The Chargers just got very, very lucky. They had a false start call for a touchdown that should have been called back. They had a double deflected touchdown, and they had a block in the back on a punt return for a touchdown they shouldn't have had. They had 21 points they should not have had in reality, and they barely beat Scott's best bet. Scott's logic about why the Chargers were so bad then applies still now, why they're a good bet against. I told myself after that game, I can't wait to bet against the Chargers. And then I didn't love the game last week. This is that opportunity that I've been looking for. I love the Chiefs in this spot. The Chargers are not very good. Mr. Body Language himself will find some way to mess it up. I like the Chiefs.
Tell us how you really feel about Phillip Rivers. Don't hold back, JK. Lots of good stuff to unpack there. Oh, you go ahead.
He's got like 12. He's got like 12 kids, right? So he didn't want to sell his house when they moved. So he bought like a $250,000 SUV that's been converted. So he lives in San Diego and drives back and forth and does his video work in the car on the way back and home.
That's intense. As a former coach, is that a process you'd trust?
It's got to wear on him. That and the 9 kids running around. There's no way he's ready.
Having some fun on the show this week. I like it. And compelling info on the Chiefs side for sure. But my favorite thing in that spiel from JK, even more than the vitriol for Phillip Rivers, was the point that he makes about that pick from Scott a couple of weeks ago. You shouldn't base your evaluation of the quality of a certain pick only on the outcome. You've got to look at the decision that was made and all the type of luck that goes into some of these decisions.
I appreciate
we say it all the time, Pete.
Pointing that out. Yeah,
absolutely. No, Pete, we do this all the time. We talk about it on the show. We talk about it in our personal lives on the phone. His money was in right.
Yep.
He just got unlucky. You just got to get your money in right. Get your money in right, and in the long run, you'll be fine. Just get your money in right.
There's a nice segue. There's a very nice segue to the next game I want to talk about, which is on Sunday, New England at Pittsburgh. And, I'll just ask it like this, and we'll start with you on this one, JK. I know you had a brutal, I don't want to say season-changing beat. That's probably too strong, but certainly week-changing beat on the Patriots, teased down to where you just needed them to win the game. Do you feel like your money was in good on that bet and you just got unlucky? Or do you look back at all the things that happened in that game beforehand and feel like do you feel okay about the beat?
Not to the same degree that I think Scott's money was in right on his previous play when it came to the Chargers and the Steelers game. I mean, look, New England probably allowed him to stay into the game, a game that I didn't think that they would even be in. However, you don't expect to lose in that situation. I'm watching. I had the Chiefs. I had the Saints. So the Saints start off a little rocky. I sweat that game. Then I flip over to sweating the Chiefs game. And
which was too much of a sweat. Yes.
And there's nothing worse than seeing there's a beat like that is bad. I'm sure it's bad live, but it's even worse when it's the ticker that tells you that you got beat. like, well, wait a second. So somebody hit the wrong button. There's no way they have 34. There's no time on the clock. Very tough.
I'll get back to you for your opinion on this game, but first I want Scott's reaction as a Patriots fan to this miracle in Miami. How did you deal with it?
Well, I wish I was watching the ticker and not the game. I can tell you, JK, it was no better watching the game. I wasn't even paying that close attention because it's that point in the day, right, where results are coming in, games are maybe going into overtime, you're looking at lines for the 425 games. So I'm looking at my monitor, and I've got the TV, behind me, and I'm kind of like, glancing up, and it's like, all right, here goes Tannehill, like, fading back, and, as he's fading back, I'm, looking at some lines in the 425 game, and then I'm looking back up, and as soon as I kind of saw Kenyon Drake sort of cutting toward the middle, I just had a mental note of like, oh, play's over. Like, that never works. Like, it just never works. And we were talking about this here in the office for Sports Form about 3 weeks ago, and we were we're reflecting back on that Northwestern Ohio State horrible beat where Ohio State had scored late and they ended up going up by 4, but they were laying 6.5. And Northwestern did all these laterals and it ended up back in their end zone. And it's like, it's the play that never, ever works. And then it just kind of keeps going. And it's like, oh, he cut inside, but now he's cutting back outside. And I knew Gronk was on the field, but if he's on the field, he's on the field to protect the goal line. And I had no idea what he was doing, wandering up to the 7-8 yard line, because
strange.
That's when he lost the angle, and then it was done.
Yeah, it was
like,
very
if he
strange.
stayed on the goal line and protects the goal line, and it's not just Gronk. Like there was 5 defensive players there that did it completely wrong. But JK, and you know this as well as anybody, right? When a play breaks down and just becomes backyard football, you have a combination of guys are playing backyard football, and then guys like Stephon Gilmore, who's playing his lane and playing his position and is worried about a throwback. And you've got different guys doing different things, and it's complete chaos. And give the Dolphins credit in that their offensive linemen were busting their humps down the field and throwing blocks, and it was mayhem. But at the back of it, and I feel bad, Gronk shouldn't have been on the field. Devin McCourty was on the sidelines. He's their normal free safety. He's going to be able to chase that one down. And the crazy thing about Gronk being in the game is, I know they put him in there to knock down Hail Marys. That was not going to be a Hail Mary.
It was too far back.
Can't throw the ball 72 yards.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, but like everything just went wrong on it. And it was the lead up to that was aggravating. It's almost like there's some games as a fan, not as a handicap, you're like, you know what, the Pats deserve to lose that. And they deserve to lose it because Brady, at the end of the first half, not knowing how many timeouts, they left 3 points on the board. They missed an extra point in the game, and Gostkowski missed an easy field goal. Now, if they get the field goal they should have gotten with Brady, knowing how many timeouts there are, that's 3 points. The extra point's a point, and then the relatively easy field goal for Gostkowski. At that point, the Dolphins aren't even doing anything at the end of the game because they're down, They're down 14, 16 points. They're just handing the ball off up the middle, and the game ends. And I know it's all ifs and buts, but that to me was the more infuriating thing, is that they even put themselves in the position to lose that game because they made the kind of mistakes that coach and that quarterback normally do not make.
It's shocking.
And I'll also say that kicker doesn't make.
Right. It's shocking when you as much praise, obviously, as we've heaped over the years on Belichick and Brady, when you could point to like this very rare case where clear errors were made. But let's look forward, and JK, will go back to you for your view on this contest. New England heading to Pittsburgh. How do you think the Pats are going to bounce back from this one? I think you got us stuck on mute, JK. It had to happen at some point during this broadcast. Maybe it's something more severe than that. Scott, we'll start with you, and I'll see if I can find JK. How do you think the Pats are going to bounce back in Pittsburgh?
All those points to...
Oh, there you are. I already threw it. I just threw it to...
Am I losing you a little bit?
Yeah, you lost me completely. Didn't have you for the last minute or so, and I just threw it to Scott, so you can try to get organized while we hear his thoughts on this game, and then we'll loop it back to you.
Yeah, I have to be honest with you. The Patriots have not been impressive on the road this season, and that's what scares me about them in this game, right? Early in the season, they got hammered at Jacksonville, and a Jacksonville team that has turned out not to be very good. They got hammered at Detroit, a Detroit team that has turned out not to be very good. They did win impressively in Chicago, but they got hammered at Tennessee, and the game we just talked about against the Dolphins. Now, the road wins have been against the Bears, the Bills, and the Jets. So, this is their final road game of the year, and I think you have to call into question what's going on here. If I had to play the game, I would take the Patriots because even though I'm talking about the road woes, you look at what's going on in Pittsburgh right now, and maybe they just have too many injuries to be able to come back from. The last 3 games, losses at Denver, the Chargers game we talked about, I do agree with JK that the Steelers were the right side of that. But for them to lose to that Raiders team that has been getting trounced by everybody is definitely reason for concern. I think you also have to look at the head-to-head between the Patriots and the Steelers recently, and the Patriots have just absolutely owned the Steelers. And it's been on the road, it's been at home, and I just think that because the quarterbacks and the coaches are the same. There has been kind of a sustained rivalry here. And you look at Brady, 11-2 against Pittsburgh, 10-2-1 against the spread. And because of that recent history and really some of the bad beats the Steelers have taken, I feel like the Patriots are kind of in the Steelers' head a little bit. And I just feel like they're always able to game plan well against them. The Steelers are a team that likes to put pressure via the blitz, and the way to beat Brady is to get pressure with 4 and drop 7 into coverage. And the Steelers they just refuse to change what they do. And you understand it. You understand a guy like Tomlin and a mindset like the Steelers being a physical team, that they just come in and say, we're just going to do what we're going to do, and we're going to out-execute. And it just never works, and they never change the game plan. And I have no reason to believe that they're going to do it here because they're not capable. They don't have the front 4 to put the pressure on Brady. They put pressure on by bringing relatively exotic blitzes, and that just does not work against Brady. He gets the ball out way too quickly.
Lately, that rivalry you mentioned has been a little bit like that of the hammer against the nail. The Patriot dominance been very evident. JK, how about this one? Do we have you back, and do you have a play in this game?
Yeah, my dad was calling me. He's telling me he wanted to bet the 3-1-8 trifecta box at Mountaineer or something. I don't know what he was doing. Part of that story is serious. My dad does always bet the 318. It's our address, but he wasn't calling me to tell me that. No, I think that if you want a team that's going to be able to bounce back from a really devastating loss like that, it's Tom Brady, it's Belichick. I mean, they're the team that was down to the Falcons and came back in the Super Bowl. They don't really get shooken up too much by some weird stuff that can happen throughout a season. They'll be fine. Maybe here's the thing. It's either a no play for you or it's a you believe what I believe, that I don't care if I was betting with Pete's sister's money. I'm never going to bet that body language number 2, Ben Roethlisberger, is going to ever beat one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game. I can't put my money in that arena. So it's either a Patriots for me or a what game is on channel 207.
All right, let's move on to another one of the games on our list, and that is the New Orleans Saints at the Carolina Panthers. Current line, Saints by about 6.5, over under of 52.5. JK, we'll keep it with you for this one. This is another one. I think I know where you're going to go based on the history of things you've said about these quarterbacks on this show.
Are you talking about the Mount Rushmore of bad body language? Yeah.
We're not talking about the Giants today, so you're not going to be able to pick on Eli Manning. But your observations in the past on Cam Newton, his body language isn't so bad when he's winning.
Funny enough, we started off this conversation, this show with the mention of Paco Lopez. He's known for his ability to get a horse out of the gate and go to the front. Cam Newton is a front runner. When things are going good, Cam's the happy-go-lucky guy who's encouraging his teammates, and body language is good, and you look at that big 6'4" frame, and you believe in him. When things go wrong, he goes south, and he starts moping around, and and I really do believe that the teams buy off of that. That's why I think Jacksonville's defense suddenly turned out to be a laughable defense in the NFL. It's not because they suddenly got bad. It's because you feed off of the other side of the football. It's very important. And the offense has been so bad for Jacksonville. And I just feel like they do the same thing with Cam. Not New England, but New Orleans has underperformed offensively from their standard the last 2 weeks. They're going to play better. I don't care if it's on the road. I don't care where it is, if it's on Mars or on the moon, if you're Steph Curry. They're going to play better. And as soon as they jump out to a 10, 14-point lead and the thing starts to get away, it's going to really run away from Cam Newton and the rest of the Carolina Panthers. I'm a big fan of Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints. I think they'll bounce back. And they bounced back in the second half of the game they played against last week against Tampa Bay. So I think they'll be fine. That's where I'm going to lean. Yeah. And they're definitely involved in all of my teases.
I was going to say, this has JK teaser written all over it. And just to back up your point about Cam Newton and the front runner thing, I know some folks who've made some money over the years with that as an in-game betting angle. And I think there's that's not just anecdote. I do think there's some signal there in terms of in-play wagering. Scott, how do you see this one? What do you think about this line? Is it the right number?
I think it is the right number. I think I'm staying away from this game. I think it's a tough call. At this point in the season, a team going on the road and giving that number of points. And there does seem to be some sharp action on Carolina. I can't see, for the reasons JK pointed out, siding with the Panthers here. I mean, they're in free fall. Now, the other side of that is, this is kind of a game that, they can salvage their season. I'm not sure if I buy that. The defense, if it comes to play, should be formidable enough at home. And traditionally, the Panthers have been a much better home team than a road team. Now, they ended up, the Seahawks came back on them a couple weeks ago in Carolina. I was surprised by that. But I would not feel comfortable laying this many points on the road, even with a team like the Saints. I just feel like in a divisional matchup, it's tough to lay this number.
Is it a pass for you at that in every regard, or you have anything on the over/under?
No, it's a pass for me. I am looking and leaning maybe toward the under in this game at 52.5. I'm going to be honest with you. At this point in the year, I really start to take weather into consideration, and especially wind. And I know it's down in Carolina, but the kind of weather they've been having recently, I think I'm going to be watching some radar as much as anything in the 48 hours heading up to that game. And if it's going to be a windy day, and that's kind of what happened in Tampa. And it's funny because in December, when you think about weather, people usually think about just snow and freezing rain, but wind is the key factor. And actually, the game I ended up betting the most on was the under, and was 55 in the Tampa-New Orleans game this past Sunday because of the wind being 18 to 22 miles per hour in that. And as good as Drew Brees is, he's not the guy who's going to be, gunning the ball around the yard. He doesn't have the arm strength that he once had, and that a lot of other quarterbacks have. So that's what I'm looking at. I'm not ready to pounce on it quite yet, but if that's going to be a windy game, I'm going to go under 51.5 or 52, wherever that winds up.
All right, that's the Monday night game. We had a little bit of a host fail. I should have probably mentioned the Sunday night game that I want to talk about before the Monday night game, but that's Saints and Panthers, Monday night, 8:15 on ESPN. The aforementioned Sunday game pits the defending Super Bowl champions, Philadelphia Eagles, on the road to the other Los Angeles team, the Los Angeles Rams. Who've looked a little bit more human lately. Scott, we'll start with you. I mean, this is a big line. Rams by 9.5 here, back in the friendly confines of home. How do you see it?
Yeah, the number does not scare me here, and I like the Rams here. I liked the Eagles against the Cowboys, and as much as I would like to complain that I got a bad beat on that touchdown deflection in overtime, I did not deserve to win that wager, and the Eagles did not deserve to cover. That was the right outcome in that game. Now, the Cowboys were sloppy with the football, but they dominated that game. They put up a ton of points and yards against the Eagles there. I cannot see how this banged-up Eagles secondary is going to stand up to a Rams team that is going to turn things around after putting up the 6 points in the cold against the Bears. And we did talk about that in the last week's show. I loved the Bears in that one, and a lot of it was because of the cold and what Goff had done, even in a limited sample size. But I thought the combination of primetime game on the road, cold weather against a formidable defense spelled Bears money line to me. Here, I really do think that the Rams bounce back significantly. The Eagles are done. I think that the loss at Dallas sealed their fate. And I have never been impressed. I'd love to hear what JK has to say. I've never been impressed with Jim Schwartz and what he does with defenses. I think Jim Schwartz got such a break, the fact that the Patriots could not stop the Eagles in the Super Bowl. One of the most biggest tactical errors I've ever seen was Jim Schwartz in the Super Bowl against the Patriots deciding he's going to take James White out of that game. He's going to have Malcolm Jenkins line up opposite James White, and Brady was coming to the line and looking at that, and Chris Hogan was just, and Gronk, and everybody was just running free throughout the middle of the field because the free safety was up on the line of scrimmage to take away a running back in the passing game, and Brady threw for more than 500 yards. Now, I'm bringing that up to just kind of point out, like, Schwartz has not done anything to get this Eagles defense right. I know they've had the injuries in the secondary, but that secondary is absolutely lost. Toward the end of that game, they made Dak Prescott look like an all-world quarterback. Dak Prescott has a lot of solid qualities, but he should not be throwing dimes against any NFL secondary. And I just feel like this is going to be more similar to what we saw when the Eagles went on the road against the Saints and lost 45-7. I can't say I'm predicting a 38-point win here, but I would be surprised if the Rams don't win this game by at least 2 touchdowns. And I think there's value on the Rams because of how bad they looked in Chicago. This Eagles defense right now is the opposite of what the Chicago defense is.
Let me ask you, before we get to your opinion on this game, JK, just a little, we talked a lot about quarterback body language in this game. Goff in Chicago on the body language meter, something along the lines of Jack Nicholson at the end of The Shining. You think that's fair?
Well, I think that it's frustration when you're on a good football team and you're a good football player who's had success. When things don't go your way, you learn a lot about your football team. I will say this. I love to beat up on the Bears when they had number 8 there because he was the president of the body language club, and that was Rex Grossman. And so I developed this hate for the Bears just because I loved betting against them because he was so poor. They're a good football team. I mean, they really are a good football team. They've been in a lot of football games. They've beat good football teams. On the everyone jokes about the power rankings, at least my friends do, about the rankings that I have where I just kind of take into account the stats that I find important. The Bears are very high up on my situation, and I don't think they're as good as their ranking. I think they're probably like 3rd or 4th. I don't think they're, the 3rd or 4th most likely team to win the Super Bowl. However, they're a good football team, and they got after the Rams the other night. The Rams are so well coached, and they've shown such an ability to execute all year long. They're going to bounce back. And the truth of the matter is the Eagles are not a good football team. I don't care that they won the Super Bowl last year. They're just not good. And 9.5 is a lot. But, boy, if I was picking a side there, I would take them. It's a great tease game for me. And, in fact, I think that the line's climbing. At least out in Vegas, I believe the line's climbing to even a higher number. So the Rams is the side I want to be on there. I want to be with the better football team, the team that's executed at a higher level all year long, and the team that I think has a better coaching staff to motivate their players out of that loss. And you learn a lot out of a loss, especially a loss like that where you only put 6 points on the board. You learn a lot about your football team, the areas that you need to improve upon, and the areas in which you were exposed. And you can get those things corrected on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
All right, fair enough.
Can I jump in here?
Please.
Carson Wentz was just ruled out of that game as we're speaking.
Okay, interesting.
So that line just went to 11.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
And that's why my teaser says -4.
There you go. All right. Well, that's big news. I don't imagine. I mean, at what point? Let me ask you, Scott. For I think we have a pretty clear idea on how JK is using the game. For you, how many points gets to be too many points in this situation?
Oh boy, with Wentz out, how many points is too many points? I would say 13 is too many points. I know I just said before that I wouldn't be surprised if the Rams win by 2 touchdowns, so I don't want to sound like I'm going against myself, but 13 would be too many points to lay, I feel like. Okay. I need to think that through. 14 certainly would. I would not lay 14 points. Would I lay 13? Maybe. I would definitely lay the 12.5.
The sneaky thing about 11, right, is that 11, when you look at a line, I think it's important when you look at a line, whatever way it is, I think you should add or subtract a touchdown or a field goal and just see where it puts you, right? If you're at minus 11, you subtract another 3 there. Now you're at minus 14. So that's it's still a real number, because if the other team kicks a field goal, then now it's, so I think that you can get a better picture if you do that quick little exercise when you're first looking at a line. If you see a line that's plus 5, then you kick a field goal in your head. Now you're at plus 8. Now you're covering a 7-point deficit. That plus 5 means a little bit more when you take into account what it can turn into versus what it might be, on the surface.
It's interesting. I mean, I'm so used to looking at those numbers as kind of dead, but I've always been more of a money line bettor anyway. And I think especially for teasers and whatnot, that sort of mental exercise probably makes a lot of sense when you're trying to choose between games to figure out where your comfort level is. Gentlemen, we are almost out of time, but I did promise that we were going to talk a little about these bowl games coming up in the next week. And also, we need to get to best bets. So, in the interest of saving time, let me see if I can get a best bet from each of you on these bowl games coming up in the next week or so. JK, we'll start with you. I believe you had something up your sleeve.
Yeah, Fresno State keeps showing up. They've been in my top 10, top 15 pretty much all year long. Arizona State has a receiver that if you've never seen, just Google him. I can't remember his name, but it's interesting. Google a picture of him. He's a freak. He looks like a combination between Terrell Owens, Des Bryant, and Megatron. I mean, he's a freak-looking athlete. He is not going to be playing in the football game. Fresno State has been good all year long. They're 11-2. They know how to win. And I think that a lot of times I'm not liking this trend of these players not playing. I really think it sends a lot. It's shockwave through your program, right? It's like, wait a second. For the last 4 years I've been here, you've been preaching to me about team and being unselfish and being a champion is not a sometimes thing. It's all the time thing. All these sayings that these coaches are giving these players, and then suddenly their best player on their team's not going to play for selfish reasons. I think it rings through, and it makes a lot of the guys lose their motivation. And I'm going to play against a lot of teams where their star player has decided not to play, because I think even more than on the field, it hurts them off the field as well.
I'll say this. It's another in-game angle. Guessing bowl motivation can be a very dangerous game. I mean, I like your anecdotal case there, JK, but you've seen times where you'll see the better team in a lesser bowl game, and 2 drives in, you just know their heart's not in it. And I've had some good success also looking at that for potential in-game wagers. So just, it is something to think about, I think, especially in these early games where the better team might be a little bit unmotivated. I can't tell you what it's going to be beforehand almost ever, but sometimes you watch a few drives and you can see it. Scott, how about you? You have a game to make a best bet out of in these first few bowl games we're going to be seeing starting Saturday?
Yeah, now just full disclosure here, you do not know what I'm going to say, but you could not have segued any better to the pick I'm going to give out here, Pete. I have to give you a lot of credit for that, and that's Middle Tennessee going up against Appalachian State. And the reason, a big reason why, and people have listened to me, right? I like to use stats, and I analyze, and I use betting systems. To me, this is a relatively simple case in the New Orleans Bowl, Middle Tennessee getting 7 against Appalachian State of motivation. And what better motivation for an all-time great Conference USA quarterback in Middle Tennessee's Brent Stockstill. His father is the head coach. He's been the starting quarterback for a number of years now. And actually that number of years is 5 because he did redshirt at one point after suffering an injury. He's coming off another spectacular season. And to me, I just feel like, this is a longtime coach at Middle Tennessee. He was Conference USA's MVP. And you just get the sense that this team is going to rally around and just deliver this head coach what might end up being the most important win of his career from a sentimental point of view. And getting a win in his son's final game as the quarterback, I just think there's probably no greater motivation than you can think of than this kind of situation. And look, Middle Tennessee is a solid program and a solid team as well. And I think getting 7 points here, to me, in this kind of a game, I just think there's great value. And I would also consider taking the money line here that's hovering around plus 230 most places, plus 225 some places. To me, this is a big motivation game for Middle Tennessee, a solid team from Conference USA going against a Sun Belt team. I love Middle Tennessee in this one.
Two more quick things, actually. I'm going to keep you guys longer than I said, and I apologize in advance. One, now this didn't work out so well last week at the Army-Navy game where I came up with my action bet, and it didn't do too well. But I am on Saturday going to be with a mutual friend of JK and mine, who we've talked about a lot on the other podcast, the DRF Players podcast. I'm talking about the Prince of Keeneland himself, Jake Ballas, big Houston Texans fan. So I have a feeling I'm going to end up somewhere where adult beverages are served, watching the Jets and the Houston Texans. Do either of you have an action bet for me in this game? Any type of way to lean? JK, have you looked at it at all?
No, I'm just telling you right now, Jake thinks the Texans are so good. We're sitting eating dinner today, and he's like, hey, man, did you see this? And I look over his computer, and it's like some dumb headline about them winning 8 in a row. We've been going back and forth. He keeps making fun of me because I have the Jacksonville Jaguars high on my power rankings. I've since knocked them out. Whoever the Texans are playing, I am rooting for. So I'm the wrong person to ask.
All right.
Go Jets, Jets, Jets.
Scott,
you got anything for me on this one?
Based on that, yeah, you have to take the Jets. I mean, it's worth even losing the money, right? It's just for the possibility of needling this guy about. I took the crummy Jets.
His beloved
I think it's tough to take. I think it's tough to take the Texans on the road, laying this many points. If I had to play the game anyway, I would play over 41.5. I just think that's such a low number, and we've been seeing these sub 42 numbers pretty consistently going over. So that's the way I would play this one. But it sounds like a golden opportunity for you to take the Jets here and buy happiness.
I am sitting across from the Prince of Keeneland right now, and I told him, I said, hey, the guy Scott on our show, he likes over 41. And Jake says, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. We have a high-octane offense.
He sees the world through Texan-colored glasses or something. I'll check the wind. If the wind agrees, I will make that overplay. I will have my action. I don't want to root against poor Jake, as much as fun as it would be to watch you put the needle in further, JK. Last thing is, I'm just going to throw this out there. We'll see how the audience reacts. Whatever sort of game we come up with for the bowl games next week, maybe it would be fun to include a listener in the conversation. Get some new blood in here in this fun loosey-goosey format we've been rocking with this week on the DRF Sports Form podcast. If you are somebody who has ambition to be on a podcast, send us an email, podcast@drf.com. Tell us why. Gosh, it just occurred to me as I'm saying this out loud that this is another thing now that my friend Gil Alexander can claim we've ripped off from their show, as they, in their Score X contest that they have all year, the prize for the end of the year is to have a listener on the program. So with apologies to Gil, we're gonna see how this goes. We'll see what the reaction is like, and perhaps we'll have another voice on next week's show when we're talking about these bowl games. And that's it. That's all the time we have for this edition of the DRF Sports Form podcast. I'd like to thank Scott Gramling. I'd like to thank Jonathon Kinchen. Most of all, I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in and listening and downloading and doing all that great stuff. We will be back next week. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale, and if you're betting this weekend, I hope all the bounces go your way and nobody does a 3 lateral 75-yard, whatever you want to call that, Boise State play to defeat you in the dying seconds.